Welcome back, Deep Divers. Ready to dig into some more fascinating source material? Today, we're stepping back in time to 1963 to explore Stanley Milgram's famous, maybe infamous is a better word, obedience experiments. Now, when you hear those words, Milgram obedience experiments, what comes to mind? Yeah, I get it, probably a little intense, but put aside those images of Frankenstein's lab, we're not actually talking about electric shocks themselves, more what they represent. We're really trying to understand why people might do harmful things when someone in charge tells them to. It's all about the why. Our main source material today is Milgram's 1963 paper, Behavioral Study of Obedience. See, he designed this whole thing at Yale to answer a pretty unsettling question: could ordinary people, just like you and me, be persuaded to hurt someone they'd never even met? And the results, well, let's just say they were more than a little eye-opening, to put it mildly.
So picture this. It's 1961, you're at Yale, and you see a sign for a study on memory. Seems harmless enough, right? You volunteer, you walk in, and there's this, imposing machine. It's a shock generator, to be exact. And not just any shock generator. This is the real deal. Type ZLB, made by the Dyson Instrument Company in Waltham, Massachusetts. They even put the details in the study. It's got all these switches, starting at a pretty mild 15 volts, but going all the way up to, get this, 450 volts. And the labels on those switches: slight shock, moderate shock, even danger, severe shock. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling my heart rate go up just thinking about it.
Yeah, and you've got to hand it to Milgram. He knew how to design a study that would get people's attention. But it wasn't just about creating a scary atmosphere for the sake of it. There was a real method to his madness. He was deliberately creating a conflict, that natural human aversion to causing pain versus our deep-seated obedience to authority, like this mental tug of war playing out inside each person. And, before he even flicked the on switch on this whole thing, Milgram, he asked a bunch of Yale students what they thought would happen. Like, how many people will go all the way to 450 volts? And not one student, not a single one, thought anyone would actually do it.
Really? So they figured people would just, put the foot down and say, nope, not doing that, it's wrong.
Exactly. Common sense, right? Basic human decency. But, the results were, how to put it, not what they expected.
Oh, I bet. So spill the beans. How many people went all the way?
26 out of 40.
26 out of 40.
Uh-huh.
That's a lot more than I would have guessed what was going on in that room.
It's a perfect example of what psychologists call situational attribution. Basically, the idea that the environment we're in, it often influences our behavior even more than our own values do.
So it's not that these were, bad people.
Right. They weren't cruel, they weren't sadists, but put them in the right situation, authority figure, those shocks increasing bit by bit, it created this pressure cooker, and most people, they just couldn't stand up to it.
Okay, so we've got the setup, the whole conscience versus authority thing. We've got the surprising results. Way more people than you'd expect actually willing to inflict what they thought was harm. But how'd Milgram get them there? It's not like he could force their hand onto the switch.
Exactly. He had to be subtle about it. He used what he called prods, these little verbal nudges, to keep the participant going if they started hesitating.
Like what? Give me an example.
Oh, simple things like, please continue, or the experiment requires that you continue.
That's it.
Yeah. But in that context, those phrases, they carried a lot of weight.
It's kind of creepy when you think about it, the power of those words in that specific situation.
Totally. And that's where it gets really interesting, right? We see how these subtle pressures, they can really mess with our heads, change how we act. It's not always some big in-your-face force. It's the small steps, each one making it a little harder to back out.
Like a frog in boiling water, maybe.
Exactly. Milgram, he actually documented 4 different prods he used.
Oh, really? Like levels of persuasion?
Kinda, yeah. The first 3, they were all variations on a theme, please continue, or the experiment requires that you continue, and then it is absolutely essential that you continue.
So pretty insistent, but not, threatening.
Right. Only if the person still refused after those 3, then he'd hit him with prod number 4. You have no other choice. You must go on.
Wow. And to think, most of the time, he didn't even need to go that far, huh? Those first 3 were enough. It's just, I don't know, kind of chilling to think that such simple phrases could have that kind of power over people. And it makes you wonder what was going on in their heads. Were they just robots following orders? Or because it doesn't sound like it was always easy for them to go along with it. Milgram, he even describes how distressed some of the participants got.
Oh, excellent.
He talks about this one guy, a businessman. Let me see if I can find the exact quote. Here it is. He says, I observed a mature and initially poised businessman enter the laboratory, smiling and confident. Within 20 minutes, he was reduced to a twitching, stuttering wreck who was rapidly approaching a point of nervous collapse.
Oh.
So clearly, they weren't just blindly obeying.
Right.
They were feeling the pressure, maybe even questioning what they were doing. But
Totally. And that internal struggle, that's really the core of what Milgram's findings were all about. He argued that these participants, they weren't bad people, they weren't heartless, they were caught in this web of conflicting impulses, wanting to be good, but also afraid to disobey authority, plus the whole pressure of the situation itself.
Right. It's like you're at Yale, one of the most prestigious universities in the country.
Exactly.
And you've got this guy in a lab coat telling you it's important to continue. Plus, you've already given all these shocks, so it's got to be hard to just suddenly say, nope, I'm done.
It's easy for us to sit here now and say, I would never do that. But Milgram shows us that it's not always so simple.
And that's what makes it so relevant, I think. Because this isn't just about some weird experiment from the 60s. It's about how we deal with authority in our everyday lives, at work, in our families, even just out in public.
All the time, we're constantly navigating those waters.
So, okay, big question then. What do we do with this information? What's the takeaway, the thing people should really hold on to?
Well, if I had to pick one thing, I'd say it's this. We're all capable of obeying authority to a degree that we might not want to admit. We'd like to think we'd always stand up for what's right, but, well, Milgram's study suggests it's not always so easy.
Depressing but true. So, are we just doomed to repeat history? Is there any hope?
There is. The good news is, by understanding these situational factors, the authority figure, those incremental steps, the pressure to conform, we can start to recognize them in our own lives. And maybe, just maybe, make different choices.
So it's not about beating ourselves up for being obedient types. It's about being aware of it, right?
Exactly. It's about cultivating that critical thinking, that ability to take a step back and say, hold on a minute, what's really going on here? And what do I believe is the right thing to do?
It's like having that internal alarm bell that goes off when we're entering a potential obedience zone. And maybe, just maybe, knowing about Milgram's experiment, it can make that alarm a little louder, you know? Well, folks, that about wraps up our deep dive into the Milgram experiment for today. It's a lot to digest, no doubt. But hopefully, you'll walk away with some food for thought, something to chew on the next time you encounter a situation where obedience is at play. And remember, deep divers, the quest for knowledge and self-discovery never ends. So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into those fascinating sources.